Hello guys and welcome to my new video. So today I decided to have a look at the best classes in my opinion for boosting. In terms of everyone who pre-ordered Battle for Azeroth received a character boost that's going to bring up a character to 110 level, and you won't have to put in any effort in leveling, and a lot of people are just confused about which class they should boost. I get this question a lot on my streams, on the YouTube comments, and I look through them. Questions like, what do you think about this class? What did I'm picking between these groups of classes, these groups of specs, and I'm wondering which one would be the most fun, which one will provide the best viability in high mythic progression or high mythic Antorus progression, which one would be the easiest to play, which class might not be that legendary dependent. So I get like a lot of these questions, and I decided to make a video about the classes that I feel like are extremely strong in mythic progression, in mythic Antorus progression, mythic plus dungeons. There are some of the classes that are easier to play for the beginners, because there's going to be a lot of the people who are going to be watching this video. There's going to be a lot of people who are coming back to World of Warcraft. They have no idea about which classes are good, have no idea which classes are easy to play, no idea how to get the legendaries or which legends are good. So hopefully this video will give you some sort of inkling towards which class might be the best choice for you. And of course, I'm not going to go through every spec and every class one by one, because that'll take just too long. I'll cover the ones that I feel are important, the ones that I feel are really, really strong. And in this video, we'll be looking at classes and specs. So we'll be looking at classes right now. What do we mean by classes? We'll be looking at classes that have extremely strong specs. So there are multiple classes in World of Warcraft that can provide damage, healing, and DPS. And there is a certain class that can provide damage, healing, melee DPS, and range DPS. And that is Druid. So for a lot of people who are out there who might be altaholics, who just have as many alts as they can get their hands on, Druid can basically be a class that will give you all of the options, all of the roles that you might need or want in this game, without having to, you know, you'll be able to pick up gear easier because you'll be doing like raids and things like that, and you'll say, this is for my off spec, this is for my third off spec, this is for my second off spec. So it's easier to gear in terms of having one main character that can do multiple roles. And I am a Druid main, I'm a Resto Druid main, and doing a lot of raids, I started playing Paladin Druid, I started playing Feral Druids, and just gearing them up is much easier. So first of all, Druids have been extremely strong the whole expansion, and there are multiple comments, not only on my videos, but in multiple other forums, just saying that Blizzard loves Druids. And there is some truth to that. Guardian Druids have been one of the strongest tanks in the game, in the whole expansion. They were so strong at one point where Blizzard just had to remove their magic mitigation completely from the game in order to make them balanced. There was Guardian Druids were really strong. So if you want to be a tank, Guardian Druids are really strong. They're great for Mythic Plus content, they're great for high Antorus progression. They have multiple legendary combinations that are great for DPS and the damage reduction. So you can, you know, it keeps the game fresh. You can have different legendary combos. It keeps the game fresh, and they're easy to play. Now, a lot of the tanky classes can be regarded as easy to play. There are certain classes that are much harder, that are much more punishing. And Guardian Druids are, you know, I would place them in an easy to play section. I would say that they are quite beginner friendly. And if you're a new player, if you're looking to get into tanking, Guardian Druids, considering how strong they are and how relatively beginner friendly they are, it's a good choice. It honestly is a good choice. If you decide to go with a Druid, you can also opt in to play a healer spec, and Druids have Restoration Druid. Resto Druids, again, have been extremely strong. There are points in the expansion like Nighthold where Druids were just absolutely overpowered, and they had to be, there was a like all across the board nerf in terms of healing, and they got brought back into where the healers are. Now, I'm going to be covering Druids a bit later on, but healing in World of Warcraft, healing in 7.35 has been very balanced. So there is no healer spec that's above everyone else. It's all about the terms of which gameplay do you prefer the most. But Restoration Druids are very strong. Restoration Druids are very strong in Mythic Plus. In high Antorus progression, they're probably one of the easiest classes to gear, purely for the fact that as a Restoration Druid that's raiding, you'll be picking up probably the highest item level gear. You won't even care about the stats until you get too much of a certain stat. But that's how easy it is. Unlike something like a Holy Paladin, where you have to reach a crit cap of 50% in order to be, you know, somewhat viable, or, you know, make sure that you play your class to the full extent. So Resto Druids are extremely easy to... They're not that hard to play either. They're quite a beginner-friendly class as well. At the start, you can just, like, you know, get used to rejuvenation spam and things like that, and over the progression of your character, you can start picking up different tips and tricks about how to fully utilize your class. But that saying goes to a lot of classes. But Resto Druid is definitely, again, quite easy to pick up. It's one of the easiest classes to itemize for, because, like I said, a raiding Resto Druid, most of the secondary stats are going to be very equal. And Resto Druids are very competitive in high Antorus, in high Mythic Antorus, and in Mythic Plus keys as well. And now let's look at other classes that Druids provide. So, Balanced Druid. You want to be a ranged DPS. Balanced Druids have been, like, you can say that they've been the kings, or very, very strong AoE multi-dollars in this expansion, in this patch, in 7.35 with Tier 21. Tier 21 has increased Balanced Druid dot potential by a lot. And Balanced Druids, because Antorus is quite AoE damage heavy, Balanced Druids have been doing extremely well. The rotation, again, is not that hard. Is really not that hard. There's just a couple of spells that you need to keep track of, depending on single target and AoE. Now, the legendary choice for Balanced Druids is way different. There's a lot of different legendary choices for AoE, for sustained AoE, for multi-dotting AoE. And there is only one combo of legendaries that's for regarded as the best single target one, but it's quite legendary dependent as well. So that's Balanced Druids. The downfall of Balanced Druids, single target is really quite poor. AoE is amazing, sustained AoE is really good, multi-dotting potential is there, single target is quite low. Now, if you want to play a melee class, Balanced Druid also gives you Druid also gives you this option. So you can play a Feral DPS, Feral Kitty. Feral has become a really strong spec over the last couple of months, over the last couple of weeks. A lot of people have swapped to Feral to try it out. Feral was an underperforming spec for a lot of the expansion. Not a lot of people were playing Ferals. Ferals were very unforgiving in terms of messing up your rotation, but Blizzard has changed Ferals in the last couple of months, in the last couple of patches, and Ferals are a lot more easier to play, or much more forgiving in terms of you mess up the rotation, your DPS won't go down by like half or whatever. So Ferals overall have much better single target than Balanced Druids. Ferals have really good sustained AoE. Ferals have really good cleave AoE with bleeds and things like that. Sustained cleave AoE, if that's a thing. On top of that, they have really great burst potential, which Balanced Druids kind of have to build up towards that. But Ferals can do some of the things better than what the Balance can do. So if you have the AP, why not just have Balance and Feral and just swap around? Like if you're doing a Mythic Plus, if it's a fortified week, maybe you should go with Balanced Druid. If it's Tyrannical week, you probably should go with Feral. And you can cover all of the bases, and they're extremely fun specs to play. So this has been covering Druids. If you want to boost a class, you cannot go wrong with a Druid. Now let's look at another really strong class that has emerged in 7.35, and that's Monks. So Monks for a long time were not the strongest classes, just purely for the fact because Mistweaver Monks, the healing monks, were regarded as pretty poor healers. There was a lot of misconceptions being thrown around about Mistweavers. There weren't many Mistweavers in the game. It's not to say that Mistweavers are really bad, it's just there weren't that many people playing it, and people just assume that they're quite bad. But over the time, Mistweavers, the healing balance has been kind of evened out. Mistweavers are doing really well. I've seen a lot of Mistweavers pushing some of the high Mythic Plus keys. I've seen Mistweavers in the top end Mythic Plus, Mythic Antorus progressions for the first time ever in 7.35. In Mythic Antorus World First, World Second, World Top 5 kills, there's been a Mistweaver Monk. So Mistweavers have made a comeback. Brewmaster Monks have been extremely strong for a lot of the expansion. Brewmaster Monks arguably were probably one of the most preferred tanking classes in Antorus, especially on fights like Mythic Argus. We're talking at the top end progression. But a lot of people can say that Brewmaster Monks are a bit harder to play. They're less forgiving about cooldown usage and things like that, but you might like that. You might want the challenge of playing a bit more difficult tanking class because you can perfect that game style, and therefore there'll be a difference in terms of a really good Brewmaster Monk and an average Brewmaster Monk. But Brewmasters are really strong. And the last spec, and one of the main reasons why Monks have become a really, really powerhouse class in World of Warcraft, is the Windwalker. Windwalker, from one of the worst DPS classes in Tombs of Garrus, they've become one of the strongest melee DPS classes and one of the strongest DPS classes overall. Their tier 21 combination of certain legendaries have been really, really strong. They've been heavily buffed by Blizzard, but no one really foresaw this kind of crazy single target DPS, crazy AoE DPS, good utility, and really actually a fun game style in terms of how their mastery works, where you don't want to have the same ability being spammed once. You kind of have to keep a rotation of abilities going. It just creates kind of a fun game style, and for some people, they just want to see big numbers, and Windwalkers will give you those numbers. Even if I know people who play classes, no matter how fun or how terrible the rotation is, they just want to be top of the DPS, and Windwalkers can provide you with that. So if you're looking to boost a certain class and you're not sure about which spec you're going to play, Druid and Monk have been extremely powerful in 7.35, and picking any of those two classes, you will have an abundance of specs to choose from, and there is really, you cannot go wrong with two of those classes. So now let's look at certain specs that I wanted to mention, because I feel that I would like to actually boost them if I would have more boosts available. So let's look at the tanks, and for me, one of the fun tanks that I've seen and that I wanted to actually kind of boost is Blood DKs. So Blood DKs are arguably one of the strongest tanking classes in the game, purely because they are so strong in Mythic Plus, really high Mythic Plus keys. Blood DKs are they've been one of the most widely used tanking classes, and at a really high Mythic Antorus progression, there were also a lot of Blood DKs, and Blood DKs are like mandatory for fights like Mythic Agramar or just Agramar in general, with the Gorefield Grasp or Grip, more commonly known as Grip. They've really been strong. They've really been strong, and for me, the fun part of it is that you can play a tanking class that's probably, there's a chance, might be the top healer. Because Blood DK self-healing is extremely powerful. There's been so many videos of people showing Blood DK soloing content, soloing Mythic Plus, or like doing Mythic Plus with no healers. And there's something really fun about playing a tanking class that's not reliant on your healer. You can just basically say, go heal everyone else, Mr. Healer, because I got this covered. And I think it's really, really fun to play a class like this, and if I had more boosts, I'd probably try out Blood DKs. So now let's look at some of the DPS. So I mentioned this DPS class a lot. So if you've seen my previous videos, I apologize if you've seen my previous videos. And I'm mentioning Affliction Warlocks because Affliction Warlocks have been really strong at 7.35, have been really strong for a lot of the expansion. They have been nerfed, but the numbers are still looking extremely strong. Now, I mentioned Affliction Warlocks because I know there's a lot of people in the game, I mentioned this before as well, that no matter how terrible or how boring or whatever the rotation is going to be, they just want to see big numbers. And Affliction Warlock will give you big numbers for single target AoE. Their multi-dotting potential is incredible. Their utility with gateways and things like that is mandatory for fights like Imanar. So everything's there. But I do know that a lot of people who are kind of forced into playing Affliction, and they might not like the gameplay. They might not like the game style. A lot of people tell me that they feel Affliction Warlock game style is a little bit boring. They prefer Destruction, but they're kind of forced into playing Affliction because of the big numbers. So it kind of depends on what kind of player you are. If you like the multi-dotting and all that, Affliction can be really great. But I would check out, like I mentioned, you might be a player that just wants to see big numbers. But Affliction is definitely going to provide you with those big numbers. Now let's look at a class that's not on top of the meters. Not on top of the meters on Mythic Plus. Not the most widely used class in the game, but I feel that it should be mentioned because there's a lot of new players who are going to be coming into the game and they're like, I'm not sure about anything. I can't remember how to play this game. Give me a class that's easy. And that is Beast Mastery Hunters. Beast Mastery Hunters are arguably one of the easiest specs in the game with like 3 button rotations. Like, the rotation is incredibly easy. Of course, there is going to be an additional complexity added with different legendaries. There's going to be a different complexity added with different trinkets. There's going to be a different complexity added on different encounters. But at the base, at the core mechanics of the class, Beast Mastery is one of the easiest specs to play. It's one of the most mobile specs in the game. And mobility is one of the things that I see is the most punishing aspect to new players. Especially new players who want to play a ranged class. Why? Because new players don't know when a damage is going to come in. And if you're playing a certain class that's going to be suffering a lot from additional movement, like you don't know if there's going to be a red stuff happening in the next 2 seconds. If you don't know that's going to be happening and you don't prepare, like for example, if you play a Balanced Druid, you can actually build up your astral power and you know there's going to be fire happening underneath your feet. When you have to move, you can press Star Surge. And technically there's going to be a global cooldown there and you won't be wasting any DPS because you kind of prepared for it. So if you don't play that class and if you don't know the damage patterns or the ability patterns, new players are going to be suffering a lot from mobility. So Beast Mastery Hunters are one of the most mobile classes, so that doesn't really affect you that much. So straight away, an easy rotation, super mobile, an awesome beginner's class straight away. And not considering those 2 aspects, Beast Mastery Hunters are probably the least legendary item dependent class in the game as well. A lot of the legendaries for Beast Mastery Hunters are just good. They're just good. There's not a big difference between the best and the worst legendary. So if you're the kind of player that's like, oh, I'm really new to the game, I've just learned about the legendary system, I'm like, what if I get a crappy legendary and I don't want to play the game anymore? There is a slim chance of that happening as a Beast Mastery Hunter. While compared to other classes, things like Fire Mages, where they are required to get certain legendaries, and if they don't get it, like, there's no point playing a class. Like it's silly when legendaries play such a huge part in your rotation, and not playing a class because of RNG can really suck. And it's one of the biggest downfalls of legendaries, and I feel Beast Mastery don't really fall into that category. And on top of that, you also have amazing utility. You have things like Misdirection for skittish weeks. You're the only class in the game that has Bloodlust and Battle Res using your pets. Keep in mind, Battle Res has been heavily nerfed in Mythic Plus content, so it's not as OP as it used to be. Plus, Beast Mastery has been buffed in the last couple of days, but the downfall is that Beast Mastery damage numbers, they're not even close to the top. They're more at the bottom, but like I said, a lot of the things that I mentioned before, are probably the reasons why Beast Mastery Hunters are not at the top of the damage meters, so keep that in mind. So finally, before the video gets way too long, let's look at the healers, and let's see which healers are a good choice for a boost. So first of all, I play a majority of the healing classes, except for Priest. So I've decided myself, personally, to boost a Priest. Healer balance in Legion, healer balance in 7.35 has been the best it's ever been. If anyone comes down and says, no, healer balance is not... Look at... You've never played previous expansions. You haven't played previous expansions and seen, like, crazy class imbalance in previous expansions where certain class was just way above everyone else. Healers are very close together in terms of HPS, in terms of utility. You can look at the logs and you can see the HPS differences. Resto Shamans are still providing more utility than everyone else. Holy Paladins are still the only tank healers, but it's not a crazy difference. It's not a crazy difference. So choosing which healer to boost, it's all going to depend on your personal game style. Which game style do you prefer and things like that. A safe choice, honestly, if you like Mythic Plus and Mythic Antorus and things like that, Paladin is a very safe choice. Paladins have been doing really high Mythic Plus keys. Paladins are basically mandatory in raids because they're the only tank healers. And they're relatively easy to start off. First of all, you might be overwhelmed by the amount of cooldowns because Paladins are very cooldown oriented class. You have like 5 or 6 cooldowns to look after. And that's not including the freedoms and blessing of protections and things like that. You have like 5 or 6 throughput cooldowns to look out for. So it's a very cooldown oriented class, but at the core, Paladin is just basically super reactive class. Someone takes damage, you're going to press a button and heal them. You don't have to know the damage patterns. You don't have to know if there's going to be damage in the next 10 seconds. You don't have to prepare for it. You just see damage and you press a button and that's it. Very, very easy to start off with. A safe bet. Everyone kind of needs them. If you want to be a more proactive healer, I consider Druids to be, because I play a Druid, I consider Druids to be a very fun class to play as well. They're proactive class. So what I mean by proactive, I mean you need to know when the damage isn't coming. You're going to be playing a completely different game style. You're going to be playing a hot class that's kind of dependent on your other healers, because you want your other healers to heal less and let your hots do more work. So a lot of other Druids get sniped and things like that. Like other healers heal people up before their hots do any of the healing, so you can get a little bit salty about that. But I feel that priests are actually a really interesting choice. So I boosted the priest because I don't have a priest, but I feel priests are really, really cool. Why? Priests are the only class that has 2 healing specs. They have 2 healing specs. They have discipline and they have holy. Those 2 healing specs are both raid healing specs. Discipline is not a tank healing spec. It kind of used to fill that niche a little bit in the previous expansions, but it's a raid healing spec. But they're completely different. The game styles are completely different. They're completely fresh. If you're sick of discipline, go to holy and you'll be like, wow, this is a new class that I'm playing. And discipline game style, first of all, discipline is regarded as one of the hardest healing specs to play because it is very proactive. You need to know exactly when the damage isn't coming. You need to know how to use your spell. Like, you're required to know a lot. You're required to know a lot before becoming a good discipline priest. But the point is, the discipline game style is so crazy different from everything else. It's a healing class that's mainly reliant on doing damage. And by doing damage, you're healing everyone else. If you're like a druid, if you're a paladin or whatever, and you're doing a Mythic Plus content, and you're doing a pug, and you're like, should I try and do some DPS and look, provide some more utility to the whole run, do more DPS and help to kill the boss or whatever faster? Should I do it? A lot of the times I know this. I know a lot of the times poke healers and stuff like that, they won't do that because they know if someone dies or whatever, they'll get blamed for that and they'll be like, why are you doing damage? Which is, I don't like this approach. But as a discipline priest, you have to pump out that awesome damage because damage will directly increase your healing. So if you're kind of a player that likes to be involved in the whole process of in the whole process of damage and healing, Discipline Priest is for you. And I feel the game style is so different from any other healer that it might be a great choice for people who are re-rolling from DPS and they want to try out healing. But at the same time, Discipline is quite hard for a new player to pick up, and I don't really want to recommend Discipline as a healing class for new players. I would recommend for you to try out Priest, to try out Holy, try out different boss abilities, different bosses, know where the damage isn't coming, and then try out Discipline Priest. And then see how crazy different the healing game style is. So this has been my video of the classes and the specs that I feel are very good choices for boosts. I know I did not mention every single spec. I know I didn't mention classes that are doing extremely well. Like, for example, if you want to be a crazy single target DPS, Enhancement Shamans are one of the strongest single target DPS in the game for pure single target fights. If you enjoy just pure single target fights, Enhancement Shaman might be for you as well. There are a lot of different classes that fit into these niche scenarios, but I don't have the time to mention it. I don't want to make the video for too long. If you have any questions, leave them in the comment section below. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like and subscribe and all of that. It really helps out the channel. It really helps the channel to grow. Thank you guys for watching this video, and I'll see you next time.